Okay, we're going to do Keys to Success number 99 in our series of Keys to Success. I'm Dr. Martin Rutherford, certified functional medicine practitioner, chiropractor.
Dr. Randall Gates, board certified chiropractic neurologist, also a chiropractor.
We're receiving a lot of requests now, which is good. It helps us out a lot. Helps us not to sit there and think about it 30 seconds before we get up here. And so we're going to talk today. We're going to direct our keys to success to one particular patient's request. And we're going to combine two into one. The effects of obesity and how does losing the weight, does it play into, and how does losing the weight play into all of the other things that you come here for? Leaky gut, fight, flight, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the interesting things when I'm doing the consults is people rarely come in with one problem, really rarely come in and say, I have leaky gut. Can you treat me for that? They'll come in with multiple symptoms, usually a laundry list, as you well know. You've been here as a patient. And the interesting part is in the end of being able to do the consult to help the patient understand that so many of these things are tied together. So if the person came in for thyroid, but they were obese and they were tired and they had leaky gut and all, we would probably be having the same conversation as if they came in here and said, I'm obese, I can't lose the weight no matter what I do. And because it turns out in our evaluation and understanding of chronic conditions, pretty much everything, all abnormalities of physiology that person presents with, or the vast majority of them, are actually connected. And so from that perspective, I think it'll be interesting to look at it from the perspective of obesity and how that in and of itself plays into a lot of other things that you are suffering from.
Yeah, as we talked about in other broadcasts, obesity, when we start to gain size to our fat cells, the fat becomes an organ unto itself, really. And these fat cells secrete a lot of inflammatory mediators, they secrete hormones, they affect leptin levels, which affects your appetite.
And most people are shocked when I tell them that. I mean, it's not like people just think it's heavy. They don't get that
so
it's created a whole new organ system with its own blood supply and those types of things.
Yeah. What is it? Every pound of fat has 2 miles of capillaries.
2 miles.
Going to. So that's where when we gain weight, it can affect blood pressure so substantially. Last night I was talking to a patient and she's gained about 10 pounds back. Otherwise she feels fantastic, but she was just saying how she can't stop eating at night. And a big part of that is this whole leptin resistance phenomena that we're alluding to, because leptin basically is this chemical that's involved with knowing when you're full. However, just as we have insulin resistance, where you become resistant to insulin when you consume too many carbohydrates for a long period of time, you can get leptin resistant when you have excessive body weight. So that causes people to not know when they're satiated or full. So they just keep having to eat and eat and eat. And the problem there is that it's a vicious cycle, and then it causes more weight gain and on and on and on. So that's basically obesity and what it's doing to your body. And the effects of losing the weight, was that the second question? I just want to make sure I'm specific. Does losing fat have help in treatment of the conditions we treat? Does losing fat help? Absolutely it does. It can help depression. They've shown that. There's a lot of literature regarding how these inflammatory chemicals from the fat cells negatively affect the frontal lobes. So many of you, we've talked about your frontal lobes, whether it pertains to post-traumatic stress or anxiety or depression or irritable bowel syndrome, and the obese chemicals do negatively affect the frontal lobe. So there's for sure a connection there, not to mention all of the other insulin resistant components that go along with gaining weight. And as we start to correct your insulin resistance, inevitably the fat cells start to lose their size. I think kind of a good thing to think about for most of you is that we're designed to starve. We have two basic physiologic states when it comes to hormonal and endocrine metabolism. We have a fasting state and we have an insulin well-fed state. And we're meant to really be in this fasting state most of the time. yet. Growing up in the Western world, so to speak, or industrialized nations, it's even parlaying into other developing nations, is that people are eating a lot. They're eating more than they probably did 100 years ago. The food supply has changed, which we've talked about. And all these factors coalesce together for people to then be in this well-fed insulin state most of the time. That causes increases in body mass, that causes insulin resistance, that causes inflammation. It's tied to inflammatory bacteria in the gut that we've talked about associated with leaky gut, creating inflammatory responses throughout your body that can range with consequences from Alzheimer's disease to polycystic ovarian syndrome to frank diabetes, on and on and on, to neuropathy. So yes, obesity is important. We don't just focus on the obesity. We don't focus on it from a calorie perspective. By focusing on it from a gut perspective and a microbiome perspective, we found that's really the trigger, the reset button for this obese issue and the insulin resistant issue.
Yeah, and one of the more interesting things that I get to share with the patients is the obesity and the aromatization, particularly in the men.
Good point.
You might want to mention that.
Yeah, because what we're seeing, and it's talked about in lay circles too, is that we have hormonal disturbances in our population, because now 2/3 of the population has a weight problem. So when you're a guy and you have excessive body fat, then your estrogen is going to go up. If you're a girl and you have excessive body fat, then your testosterone has a probability of going up because of this aromatase enzyme. Other effects for women can be just how your ovaries make estrogen versus testosterone levels. I'm trying to hold off a sneeze. But the important point, as Dr. Rutherford is alluding to, is that this can have drastic effects on your whole hormonal system, which then can affect a number of other variables. If you're a guy and you have low testosterone, high estrogen, you're more susceptible to depression,
and they give you testosterone,
and they'll give you testosterone,
which is not a good thing under those circumstances.
Yeah, you're going to make more estrogen, or it's going to cause you, your phenotype won't change. For the girls, this can be associated with polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is affecting, 20% of the females now. So it goes on and on. I mean, this is very important.
Yeah, and just to put in a little bit of a kind of a practical perspective, I mean, we never did weight loss. We have people coming now and say, I can't lose weight. And years ago, I was up against a deadline to write an article for Healthy Beginnings. So I thought I'd had in the back of my head, I wanted to write this article on weight loss for a long time. And so wrote the weight loss. I think it was like the 5 reasons you'll never lose weight. It's like thyroid, unmanaged blood sugar, stress hormones, gut problem. And it was about obesity, and people ask me, well, why are you doing that? You don't do obesity. And I said, who doesn't lose weight who comes in here? And it's a rare person who comes in here who doesn't lose weight. And a very small percentage of our patients come here to lose weight. Like it's a tiny percentage who actually come in and go, I'm obese and I want to lose weight. But it was reasoned at the time that the people who would come in would have all of these other problems. And they wouldn't connect them. And they would think, well, if I lost weight, I would feel better. And they were right. These were all folks who couldn't lose weight no matter what they did. But it was because their weight gain was part and parcel to their Hashimoto's, to their depression, to their gut problems. And really, Dr. Gates we don't have enough time to really go into all of the things that obesity affects. Just know it pretty much affects everything. It pretty much affects your hormones, affects your blood pressure, your frontal lobe.
Mm-hmm.
If it affects your frontal lobe, then you can't shut down your fight-flight mechanism, so it affects your stress levels and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty amazing. But just know pretty much everything that happens with people, with maybe the exception of the pathologies like cancers and stuff, is pretty much connected. Yeah, so that's obesity.
Mm-hmm.
So that was for Peter.
Well, we appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next week.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.